Good morning, everybody. Welcome into Coffee Break presented by Bath Fitter. I hope everyone is having a wonderful Tuesday because we're having an orange and blue Tuesday today. We've got Andrew Mason, Cecil and Mase is going to join us here in a little bit. But Mace, how are you?
I'm doing pretty well. How are you doing, Rachel?
Good. Okay, so I know you had a procedure yesterday, so I just want to make sure you're feeling better, you're feeling good, you're back at work today.
I am feeling good. It's something that if you reach a certain age, I would encourage everybody to get, and that is if you're on the other side of 45, get a colonoscopy. Most insurance plans will take care of you on that, and it's one of those. The only inconvenience really is what you have to do to prepare for it, but the procedure was painless. I was in and out of the outpatient area at the Anschutz Medical Center in about 2 hours from
Okay.
start to finish. So absolutely, this is my public service announcement to everyone 45 or older. Make sure you get a colonoscopy because you never know what they might find and how early detection might help save your life.
All right. Well, first of all, I love that you're open and honest talking about it, and I'm so happy to hear you're doing well. Well, we also got to talk a little bit about the CU women's basketball team. I'm obviously a CSU Ram, but I'm still so happy for CU as their women's basketball team will advance to the Sweet 16 after they defeated Duke 61 to 53. How cool! I can't tell you the last time a team has advanced to the Sweet 16 at any college basketball level here in Colorado. So this is great. Base, you probably can because you remember all sorts of stats like that. But this is so cool for CU women's basketball. I'm so excited for them.
Well, I'm pretty sure it'd be CU women's basketball back in 2002, I believe. It's been a
Okay.
long time. Seal Berry had quite the powerhouse going up in Boulder from in the 80s on through the 2000s. The last about decade and a half hasn't been as kind to the Buffaloes program. So this is huge. This is getting CU back to where it once was and doing so on the road. And yes, playing Duke in Cameron Indoor Stadium, it's not quite as daunting in terms of the vocal nature of the crowd on the women's side as on the men's side, but it's still a very tough place to play against a very good program. And really, I mean, there were moments in the fourth quarter last night you thought that CU might well be done. The resilience they showed, they build a lead, they lose the lead to battle back at the end, just absolutely tremendous. So it's a great day in Colorado. It's great to see on the men's or women's side a Colorado team in the Sweet 16. On the men's side, it hasn't happened since 1969. It's happened with the Buffs on the women's side a few times over the years, though.
Okay, nice. Yeah. So dating back to 2003, so
Or
20
three.
years. And Mace, you're pretty much like just a sports guru all around. Like, I can talk to you about absolutely anything, and you're just like, oh, yeah, I got this. And I love that about you.
Oh, well, I mean, it's a story. It's what's going on. I mean, the thing is, as a sports fan growing up, Rachel, I used to enjoy the changing of the seasons. Like, okay, football season would end with the Super Bowl, and you'd kind of stuff it in a drawer and you'd move on and you'd kind of focus on basketball and hockey and then baseball and things like that. I'd pull football out for the draft, put it back in the drawer after the draft, pull it back out for training camp. I think we've gotten to a point, and the NFL is kind of, it's to its credit and it's to its blame, but they've kind of gobbled up the calendar and tried to kind of put, to get into every corner of the calendar almost. And I kind of wish it was the way it was, where football kind of went on a break for most of the offseason so we could focus on other things and watch other things. So, yeah, I mean, to some degree, Rachel, they're hard. I don't think there's a sport that I don't enjoy on some level. But of course, last night with CU being in there, I had that on. I was watching that, and I was watching the World Baseball Classic, which was an amazing game between Mexico and Japan last night, and tonight's
Yeah.
the final between Japan and the USA. So you don't need football to really have a lot going on sports wise. It's a good time, even though
No,
I'm
absolutely.
wearing a football hat from the Super Bowl. But
Is that
I
from this is
digress.
from this Super Bowl, right? Yeah,
Yes, yeah,
57. Nice.
but
Look at you.
I got it at the combine though. I
Oh, no
waited.
way.
Okay, something I learned. The NFL, when they have events, they have the Super Bowl and then they organize the combine, and now fans can go to the combine in Indianapolis. So I was walking around the concourse at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, and they had this there because they had all the Super Bowl stuff that was left over. They were trying to close out. $10.
So that's the way to do it.
That is the way to do it. That's the hack I learned on NFL souvenirs. I got this for $10, and I got a program which is like $25 retail, a game program for the Super Bowl for $10, just because I bought it at the combine. So
Oh my gosh, I was gonna say that hat was probably $50 at the actual Super Bowl. Stuff was
yes,
incredibly pricey
it
down
was.
there, which
Oh yeah.
makes sense, I guess. But I do want to get back to CU because, of course, their celebration is going viral on social media. So take a listen because it's so fun to watch. Let's freaking Have you ever been a part of a locker room situation like that? I was a swimmer growing up, so we didn't really have that sort of atmosphere. But were you ever a part of something like that?
Not quite like that, no. And
Yeah.
I've been in a couple of locker rooms when I was when I've worked for teams in the past.
Nice.
Like it was weird. Like I wasn't in the Broncos, but when I worked in the Panthers locker room a couple of times for the Panthers, I was in the locker room a couple of times after big wins. But there's something there's something different about that. I haven't been in a locker room like that when it's when it's a survive and advance situation,
Yeah.
right? And also in that situation for CU, where with all respect to the Buffs, very few people outside of the black and gold were expecting them to win that game. That's it. It was such a huge upset, and the thing is, and this was actually really cool. Looking at the women's tournament in general, it has historically been a tournament that did not have as many upsets as the men's side, but this year we're seeing that. Like, not that you didn't have upsets. Like back in '98, there was a 16 over a 1 Harvard over Stanford,
Nice.
but the men's side tended to lend itself to more upsets, and the women's tournament was much more chalk. Now you're looking around the women's tournament, seeing upset, upset, upset all over the place. You saw Miami go into Indiana and win last night, and then in the first two rounds, you pull off that upset. What kind of doubles it is doing it on the home floor of the higher seed. So it's been so that the women's tournament has really. I think it's good for the women's game because it shows that maybe there's some more parity that's going on than we've seen in women's basketball, and that maybe the Final Four isn't going to be the purview of a select few programs anymore. And after watching CU last night, who's to say they don't have a shot to get to the Final Four? One doesn't know. We'll see what happens.
That's the best part about March Madness is you never know what's going to happen, and that's the same for free agency when it comes to the NFL too. Mase, obviously the Broncos ownership group, they've shelled out the cash. They've not been afraid to use it. In your opinion, who was the best pickup?
Ben Powers, the guard that they got from Baltimore, not just in terms of the style of player he is, but I think that contract, in a couple of years, we're going to be looking at that as being pretty good value. He's on the ascendancy. He's an excellent pass protector. He's got the capability to be a good run blocker. He's got that nastiness and sort of fits the direction the Broncos want to go in on the offensive line. So I love that. Like I'm a little concerned about the McGlinchey contract being an overpay. You had to do that, and I get why they wanted to stop the revolving door at right tackle. But I think Ben Powers is probably a better player. I would be surprised if he's not a Pro Bowler in the next couple of years. Sean Payton, the stat I throw out about Sean Payton, an interior offensive lineman, 16 years as head coach in New Orleans, 17 Pro Bowl seasons from the guards and the centers over the course of his time there. The Broncos had 3 in that same time span. Peyton emphasizes the interior line, and that's why I thought it was appropriate in a lot of ways that the first player we heard of coming to Denver was a guard because of how Sean Payton prioritizes interior line play more than basically any other coach in football.
Wow. So, first of all, that stat's actually incredible. But then, yeah, it comes at no surprise. But for the McGlinchey contract, you say you're slightly worried about it, and is it just because of the money, or is it because of the play we're possibly going to see?
Well, it's the play for the value, and he's got to improve in pass protection. Orlando Franklin had a pretty nice explanation about it, and you can read kind of the recap of that at DenverSports.com.
Yeah.
That he's strong. He's somebody. He's 6'8",
Hmm.
but sometimes struggles to get low, and the old cliche is low man wins in football,
Yeah.
and that's something that McGlinchey can kind of can struggle with in pass protection, and he can find and also can find himself bull rushed at times a little bit. So he's going to have to overcome that, and we'll see what happens because now he's going from a veteran offensive line coach in Chris Forster, who's been around forever, to
Hmm.
Zach Strief, who is a first-time offensive line coach here in Denver. He's been an assistant O-line coach, but not the primary O-line coach.
Okay.
So we'll find out if that combination is going to work. But sometimes in free agency, you do have to overpay, and
Hmm.
so I think McGlinchey's probably an overpay. But if he can stabilize the position, he'll probably be worth the investment for the Broncos. And then a lot of the other moves, and I noted this in the piece that I just put up at denversports.com, a lot of the other moves, Rachel, are about special teams. I mean, you see like Chris Manhertz, he can be a blocking tight end, but he's also projected to be a core special teamer. Trayvon Smith, not just a returner, but somebody who can be a gunner on special teams. Even bring back Alex Singleton. I think Singleton is going to probably be used more on special teams than he had been in the past because that's going to be a huge emphasis. I mean, when Sean Payton makes his number 2 coach on the staff, Mike Westhoff, who's a longtime special teams guru,
Hmm.
that kind of tells you how high an emphasis there's going to be on fixing that phase of the game. And as Sean Payton's old mentor, Bill Parcells, wrote in his book, the first way to kind of get immediate improvement when you're trying to rebuild a team, the first place to do it is on special teams. You can have a pretty profound impact there right away. And I think with some of these moves, Mike Burton at fullback as well, you're seeing the Broncos really looking for ways to upgrade that unit, and that brings us to some of the news of the morning.
Yeah, no kidding. And Riley Dixon. So it's not a guaranteed contract. He's just being tenured, correct?
I have on Dixon or on Waitman because a Corliss Waitman is not guaranteed because
Okay.
he's exclusive rights. I haven't seen the terms on Riley Dixon yet. I would anticipate there is a signing bonus in there that represents a guarantee.
Okay.
But yeah, it's with Waitman. The exclusive rights and restricted free agent tenders, they're actually not guaranteed. That's like
Okay.
the dirty little secret of all that. And so if they wanted to cut Waitman today, they could, and they would owe him nothing. But
Wow.
as I point out in my story on denversports.com, Dixon was a bit better than Corliss Waitman, but not okay. Like in gross average, Dixon was 11th, and Corliss Waitman was 20th.
Yeah.
In net punting average, which incorporates the return and everything else where the other team starts, the difference is only 3 spots. Dixon was 13th, Waitman was 16th. So it's a veteran presence, and I would certainly give Dixon the edge because this new coaching staff brought him in,
Hmm.
but it's not the slam dunk it would seem. I mean, this looks more like a competition potentially than handing Dixon the job.
Okay, so I'm always here for the competition besides
Me
at the
too.
quarterback position because we did that. I don't want to do that again for a long time, but I actually love that we are going to see a little bit of competition here because
Mhm,
obviously it's been tough to watch special teams, Maze. I
mhm.
mean, you're there with me. It's
Yeah.
so hard to watch them when you know you're not going to see any big time moves or anything essentially like that. So I'm totally here for it. Bring on the competition.
Not only not going to see any big time moves, but you're going to see mistakes. I mean, that the thing that I think back of the last few years is just how many easily correctable mistakes, how many timing issues were going on. Now, some of that, and this is where we get into the bigger conversation about injuries and sports medicine and
Hmm.
training staff, etc., and strength and conditioning and all that.
Yep.
Because when you have injuries, the domino effect means that special team like players will go from playing on special teams to having bigger roles on offense or defense, pardon me. And because of that, the special teams ends up having to get new people in, and so like you look back at 2021, for example.
Hmm.
There was that game against the Chargers in Los Angeles, and the Broncos roster was decimated by COVID-19 protocols absences that week. So you looked around the kickoff coverage unit, for example,
Hmm.
and there were about I think 6 or 7 players who had just basically been called up from the practice squad. Now, but this is where coaching matters as well, because if you'd had a coach who'd been sensible about it, you would have said, okay, look, we have all these new guys out there. Brandon McManus, just knock the tar out of the ball, kick it out of the end zone,
Yep.
and don't risk a return. But instead, Tom McMahon, then the special teams coordinator, says, no, let's try to place it down the right side, because that's like a big thing, is trying to place the kickoffs so teams start inside the 25 rather than at the 25 after the touchback. And of
Yep.
course, it gets returned the other direction for a touchdown. And I remember watching, I'm like, what do you do? In no way should you have been trying to place a kickoff there. So there's like mismanagement. That is something that is coming to a halt, I
Yeah.
think, with this. And you could even see it come to a halt when Jerry Rosberg took over the team in the last couple of games. And Mike Westhoff, who's the assistant head coach, Ben Kochweika, is a special teams coordinator. But make no mistake, this is Westhoff's show.
Yeah.
And basically, these are the types of coaches that aren't going to tolerate the kind of things that went on the last few years on special teams.
Oh, and thank goodness. Mates,
Yeah.
what's your record prediction for the Broncos next year?
A very competitive 9-8.
Okay. So we're pretty much the same as me.
Yeah.
Will we see any games that you believe that will come down to a mistake towards the end of the game like we saw last year?
Well, hopefully the mistakes are happening on the other side. But yeah, I mean, I think there will be a game or two. I think there will be at least 2 games, maybe even 4, that come down to a miscue. I just think
Oh.
what's going to happen this year is the miscues may not be the Broncos. And I think
Okay.
that's where special teams is interesting, because I know if DMAC were here, he'd try to tell you it's not important.
Yeah.
And he's
You
wrong.
would.
Everything matters in the course of a game. But special teams it's one of those areas where if you're proficient at it,
Hmm.
and you don't have a great quarterback, and we'll find out whether Russell Wilson can be a great quarterback this year or not. But if Russ is closer to where he was last year than where he was in Seattle, the way for the Broncos to succeed is going to be that they're going to have to win games at the margins.
Hmm.
And that's where special teams comes into play. One of the interesting stats of the last few years, post Gary Kubiak, is that the Broncos have the second worst record in the league in one-score games.
Oh.
Only Jacksonville is worse. Now, yeah, if you had a better quarterback, you probably win. You probably win some, but even something like that, you look at it and say, all right, well, maybe if we don't allow this big return here, or we don't allow, we don't have this penalty there, the game turns out differently. The game ends up flowing differently. I mean, and even games that aren't close. I think back to the one that I was talking about with Derek Wolf on the air last week was against New England in 2017, and the Broncos are on a losing streak, but they come back home.
Yep.
They'd lost 3, and they'd lost 4, including 3 in a row on the road. But they come back home. It's Sunday Night Football. Here's the chance to kind of get the season restarted. The crowd's going crazy. The Broncos get an early stop. The stadium is deafening, right?
Yep.
And Isaiah McKenzie fumbles the punt, and it's like a balloon, all the air out. And that's the kind of thing that kept happening time and again on special teams, is that you'd have these deflating moments to where, frankly, I think people end up dreading what might happen there. And it's not like it costs a lot in terms of the cap to get this right. You can do this with relatively low cost signings and some better coaching. And so one of the reasons why I think they'll be 9-8 is I think they're going to win a couple of games at the margins this year that they didn't win in previous years. And then part of it is Sean Payton, I think, being a better coach than head coach than the Broncos have had. And then if Russell Wilson is a bit better, maybe not Seattle Russ, but
Yeah.
an average quarterback, and all of a sudden, okay, that's how you've taken 5 wins and gone up to 9, and then with a break or two, maybe you're at 10. You're at 10 or 11 wins. I think they're going to be in the playoff race this year, Rachel. I really do.
Okay. Well, and maybe that's the thing when it comes to special teams. I like how you use like the balloon and the air going out of it. And maybe it is mainly momentum, right?
Mm,
It keeps the game moving and it
right.
keeps like, the teams interested and you can always get a big play so you never know what's going to happen. So I
Yeah.
think that's kind of a good way to look at it too cuz you're right. DMAC would be like it's not important at all, but when you bring up from that perspective, it can be a big momentum go-getter.
It's big when you screw it up, and this is one thing where I will say I will defend DMAC's point because ultimately he's trying to cut out the foul ups. Okay,
Yeah.
why bother returning a punt when there's the risk of something bad happening? And I
Yeah.
get that, but you want to be able to walk the path where you're not risking something terrible happening,
Mhm.
but having the potential benefit of something good, something game changing. Um, and that's where I think also with Sean Payton, he did bring in Drew Brees in '06 to New Orleans when he took over first year as head coach, and that
Yeah.
was massive. But what's the play of the Saints revival? What is the play that everybody remembers to this day that is literally immortalized with a statue outside the Superdome? It's Steve Gleason blocking a punt
Mm,
against Atlanta when they came home on Monday Night Football going for a touchdown and the Superdome just going berserk.
yeah.
And most Saints fans will tell you everything of that season, that's the moment they remember, and it happened on special teams. And if you improve that, who knows? Maybe we are talking about some kind of similar signature moment
Uh-huh.
getting this Broncos team going after the last 6 years of lousy football.
Oh gosh, I really hope so. Peter King said that the most fascinating signing was Adam Garrett Stidham to the Broncos.
Mhm.
Would you label it as the most fascinating?
I'd have to go through the entire league. It's the most fascinating Broncos signing. There's no doubt
For
about
sure.
that. I mean, it's just because of what it implies, right? It's not just that, okay, here's the guy that can step in for Russell Wilson if he's struggling. It's there were a lot of options for Sean Payton to do what he usually has done at backup quarterback, which
Mhm.
is have that known commodity as a veteran. He could have had he could have had Teddy Bridgewater. He could have had Jameis Winston. He could have had Sam Darnold. Could have had Gardner Minshew, who's got a season and a half worth of starts under his belt. And in the cases of Darnold and Minshew, for example, you're talking about contracts down on average per year value were less than the average per year value of Jarrett Stidham.
Yeah.
So clearly there was intent and the vision of something in Jarrett Stidham that made the Broncos want him. That's the thing. This isn't just, oh, let's just get whoever we can get. Jarrett Stidham was targeted, like
Uh-huh.
over options that might have made more sense. Targeted even though he only has 2 starts. And the thing that always gets me in all these stories about Jarrett Stidham is like, well, he looked great against the 49ers. How do you look the next week? Okay. When
Yeah.
the Chiefs had a week to scout him and a week to study the film and break him down, he struggled. So I don't, I'm more on the fence. I'm more down the middle on Jarrett Stidham's prospects because after the week of film to prepare, he didn't look like the same quarterback. So, what is he going to do going forward? There are some intriguing traits, and if you turn the pages of the book back to the year before he was drafted, there was legitimate conversation about Stidham being a very high draft pick in round 1. Heading into the year he came out before a senior season at Auburn that was very inconsistent and knocked him down to where he ended up being a 4th round pick. But there have always been traits there with Jarrett Stidham in terms of his arm talent, in terms of his processor, in
Uh-huh.
terms of his the mental side of the game that the NFL has been intrigued with for a while. And so I could see Sean Payton looking at the market, looking back at maybe the eval he had on Jarrett Stidham a few years ago and saying, okay, we saw him have a good start, we saw him have a shaky start, but at least we've seen that he can do it now. Because if we were talking about when Stidham got thrown out there as a backup for the Patriots in 2020, and it was rough. I think it was one of I believe it was one of those games that got bounced around because of COVID and ended up getting moved to prime time. They were
Yep.
playing Kansas City, and he struggled mightily. And actually just hit me that he's had 2 bad days against Kansas City.
Kansas City. Yeah,
Oh
lucky
boy.
us.
Oh, ugh, you
And
know.
to be honest, I actually remember that game. And I
Mhm.
think that's why I probably have, like, your first impression of somebody always sticks with you. So I kind of
Right.
have this, what are the Broncos thinking? So I'm just curious what Sean Payton really sees in Jarrett Stidham and why he was like, no, this is going to be our future if Russell Wilson doesn't work out, even though it may not be a long-term future.
Well, looking at kind of the long-term development, and Sean Payton is very patient with developing quarterbacks.
Yeah.
He had Tony Romo in Dallas
Hmm.
and didn't actually serve as the head coach when Romo got the job, but developed him for 3 years behind mostly Drew Bledsoe, also Quincy Carter, before Romo ended up moving up in '06, by which time Peyton had gone to the Saints.
Yeah.
So he understands. He's got that old school mentality that, all right, sometimes quarterback development can take time. He did look. I mean, so yeah, the first impression, it kind of sticks with all of us. I think it's just human nature. But then he looked a lot different. Look, when the Raiders brought him in last year to back up Derek Carr, the only reason like people said, okay, that makes sense, is he went from New England to Vegas, and
Hmm.
Josh McDaniels had been working with him
Yep.
in New England. Okay, let's see if he can continue the development now. And then McDaniels decides that he doesn't want him back. And so that's kind of a curious thing, but I think Peyton sees some traits that he likes, and that's kind of the intriguing thing here, because he's walking a path where he feels like he's got a reliable backup for Russell Wilson, but he may see something that he can develop in Jarrett Stidham in terms of making him a starter that just took more time to reach the surface.
Hmm.
And that's why if the Broncos are scuffling around at 3-7 and Russell Wilson looks like he did last year, the conversations on this show, on all the shows on the radio side, are going to be very fascinating, because they may well involve around, when do you give Jarrett Stidham a look?
Uh-huh. And let's talk to Cecil Lammy as we bring him in, because like I said, we got an orange and blue episode of Coffee Break today. Good morning, Cecil. And it's funny you say that, because we have Janet in the comments who says over or under on when Stidham is the starter. And that makes me laugh, because you really can't anticipate that moment, but that could actually be a reality this season, Cecil. Good morning.
Yeah, I mean, it's a reality because this team isn't going to just throw in the towel. I think it's ridiculous when people suggest, like, just suck it up and you're going to get a better draft pick next year. That's dumb. Don't be dumb. The number one rule in life: don't be an aloha and don't be dumb.
This is
And
this is rip on DMAC day. You really
no, I'm not bringing up DMAC. I
no,
didn't.
but that's his logic. That's what he says. We're kind of,
Well,
he's not
the
here, and
Broncos
all of a
aren't
sudden
in
we've torn
that
apart his
situation,
philosophy.
and I'd say this to D's face. And again, it's not about DMAC. To me, it's just about these guys are competitors. You're gonna put together a group of competitors and then tell them like, oh yeah, don't play. Like that's just ridiculous. Like this team is not in that situation. You didn't bring Sean Payton in so that you could get a better draft pick for 2024. You brought Sean Payton in to win now, and that's why the Jarrett Stidham move makes sense. So, whatever D's saying is what's D's saying, but for me, what makes football sense? What makes football logic? Football logic is like, these guys are good, they've improved their roster, they're going to run the hell out of the ball, and if it doesn't work with Russell Wilson, you have a chance with Jarrett Stidham, and you can always get your guy. Mahomes was, 16 spots Kansas City moved up, right, Mace? 26-10. They moved up.
27-10, yes.
Yeah, Josh Allen, they moved up for Josh Allen. When you see your guy, you can go get your guy. Do you think that people would want the misery and the pain and the suffering of we have a 2-win season because #reasons? If you identify that talent, you can always trade to go get that talent. And that's when, and this is where I'll back DMAC, a year from now, if you've identified Caleb Williams as your guy, you're trading Pat Surtain to get up to the number 1 overall pick. You're not trading Pat Surtain this year. That's dumb to suggest that. Next year, it would make more sense to do that if you needed to get Williams because Wilson didn't work out.
Yeah, the other thing also is you trade and you'll know what the value is of what you're getting. Like, for example, the notion of trading with the Houston Texans. Well, who's to say Houston, with whoever its rookie quarterback and the changes they've made? I mean, I love the Dalton Schultz pickup for the Texans yesterday. Cease, you and I a couple of weeks ago were speculating, wouldn't that be an under-the-radar guy for the Broncos to target, right, to upgrade tight end? Well, now he's a Texan. You like some of the moves that the Texans have made. If you trade with them, and let's say you hypothetically made this Pat Surtain trade and got their first-round pick next year, okay? Who's to say they don't go 6-11 or 7-10, and all of a sudden your
Right.
strategy is blown up? I mean, there are no sure things, but if you do that next year, you've got to. Or the one thing where I could see Surtain being traded before then is if the season gets off to a bad start. Like if the Broncos are 0-5, God forbid. But if they are 0-5, then I think you talk about trading Surtain during the season. But other than that, I think like with you, Cease, it's something that you wait until after the season, you see where you are, you see where the quarterback position is, and if you decide we have to go get Caleb Williams, move heaven and earth, you start finding ways to move heaven and earth to make that happen.
And you'll be able to do that. And here's the great thing about what the Broncos have done, and this is why it makes football sense. This is the whole thing, okay? You have to see if you can make it work with Russell Wilson. And Rachel, I apologize. I would love to cuss on this show because if you put together a crap squad and it doesn't work with Russell Wilson, and you'd be like, hey, it didn't work with Russell Wilson. That's ignorant.
Yep.
It is absolutely ignorant to come into a situation, you can tell when the caffeine's kicked in, to come into a situation where we need to find out about this guy. Put a bunch of crap around him and see if it works. That's not going to work. Build a damn team. This team, it's more than just Russell Wilson. They need offensive line. They've done that. They need defensive line. They've helped that. Like you need to continue to build the team so that when you do find your guy, you're hitting. You're not making up, well, now we got the quarterback, guys. Now we got to scramble and we're going to find everybody else. No, build the damn team. Give Russell Wilson the very best chance you can so you can exhaust all options. So if you're Greg Penner, if you're George Payton, if he's even here after that, like you can look at this and say, we gave Russell Wilson everything to succeed and it didn't work. That's on him. If you fill it full of crap and then, it didn't work, shocker. You didn't have anything around him. You didn't have a plan. You didn't have the right head coach. You had some clown like Nathaniel Hackett. You got everything you need. Now make a run. And if it doesn't work, that's when we can have those conversations about rebuild and tear it down and heaven and earth. Yes, that's when that happens. Right now, go out there and work.
DMAC and I talk about this all the time here on this show. When you guys had listed out problems 1 through 4, you actually learned last year with it being Russ, Peyton, Hackett, and injuries. How did you lay it out? And Mase, you go first.
Russ, Peyton, Hackett, injuries. Okay. I would say last year, Russ's problem number 1, but Hackett was problem number 2 and had a fair amount to do with problem number 1. And then injuries come in as number 3, because here is the thing with Russell Wilson. When you gave up what you surrendered to get Wilson, you did that because you thought he was the type of quarterback who could elevate a bad situation. Like, in New Orleans, for example, with Drew Brees, they have some teams in the mid-2010s that you look at the defensive personnel, you're like, oh, gosh. And they didn't have the wide receiver personnel that they would have toward the end of the decade when Michael Thomas was in his salad days. They went 7-9 3 years in a row. They were competitive, but not lousy because of Drew Brees. Even at 7-9, he was still elevating everybody around him to better than they should have been. By all accounts, I mean those teams were basically about 3 to 4 win teams, and Brees made them into 7 win teams. But last year, we didn't see that from Russell Wilson. We did not see a quarterback who appeared capable of elevating what was around him. And that's what you paid for. And so, with all the injuries, yada, yada, okay, you still should have been able to find a way to win 7 or 8 games, right? And some of that did fall at Russ. So I would go Russ, Hackett, injuries, and then to me at the bottom is George Payton. A, because he made a deal for Russell Wilson that almost anyone would have made at that point, and B, because even though the depth was compromised, I mean the injuries compromised it to a point that no amount of team building, even especially with just 2 drafts, was going to be able to bolster you at that point.
Okay, Cecil.
It's all on Peyton, except for the injuries. Like, so we can chop it up, baby. Like, it's fine. It's totally fine. Like, I honestly, and I don't want to sound rude, but like, I don't even care about the order. Right? For me, it's like, okay, where is a glaring problem? George Payton screwed up last year. He screwed up in multiple ways, and I'm not going to let him off the hook. And I get sick when people are like, you can't, everyone passed on those guys in the draft. You can't hold that against Peyton. Yeah, I can, because you had guys like Pacheco in your building, and then you didn't draft him. Like, that's an error on George Payton's part. So, like, it was a combination of suck. And again, I so wish I could cuss, because like it was just, all things were terrible. Hackett was a clown. Russ wasn't what he was supposed to be, but he also he wasn't coached. Like, just coach him. Guys want to be coached. You know, guys, football is about overweight men and windbreakers yelling at you, not about being your best friend and being weird about his wife. Hackett was always weird about Sierra. Like, you don't be weird about another man's wife. How's Sierra? Is she okay? Are you like me, Russ? Am I okay, Russ? Are you my fan? I'm a fan of you, Russ. I love Sierra, Russ. That's just weird. So, and this is all a combination, if we're talking chefs, like this is a George Payton stew. And, you know, so I'll blame Payton more than others, but like it was all bad. It was all terrible. It was all bad. That's gone. That's behind us. I would, you know, like to pull off a Sean Payton. Like, I'd way rather look in the front windshield than look in that rear view mirror. The rear view mirror is small for a reason. Like, and all that stuff happened, and it happened, and we can't escape that. But you're only upset by 2 things in life and in football: imagination and memory. Memory, we got the memories. We got 7 years of bad memories for this team. 6 really awful years of bad memories for this team. I would rather use my imagination and go, okay, now with Sean Payton, now with George, and George Payton has responded to pressure. I think I made Mase fall out of his chair a couple of days ago when I was like, I think George Payton's done a really good job. He stunk last year. And I'll say it. No one else will say it, but I'll say it. He stunk last year. He absolutely stunk it up last year. Not going to give him credit for Pat Surtain. That was a can't-miss pick. Like, hey, everybody, top 10 pick. He hit on a top 10 pick. Congrats. That's what you're supposed to do. So this year, George Payton has responded to pressure, and that's what I appreciate, is that now, with the pressure of losing his job, and make no mistake about it, George Payton might even still be on the hot seat. But I like the fact that Sean Payton has given this team some attitude, and now, looking forward, Sean Payton and George Payton could make a nice combination.
We'll see. Yeah, the Paytons together. Mase, thank you so much for hanging with us this morning. I deeply appreciate it, my friend. But Cecil, let's continue this wide receiver talk, because it's been interesting. You know, the rumors going on about Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy. Are they going to be here? What's going on? There's going to be movement. There's not going to be movement. How likely is it that we're actually going to see any movement in the wide receiver room?
Oh, we're going to see movement for sure. I think it's 100% likely. Now, when does it happen, and who is it? That's the question. And whether it's during the draft, somebody doesn't get a player that they want. This wide receiver class is okay. It's not great. It's not the tight end class. There might be 4 first-round tight ends, and I don't know, shocked people when I said there's 8 tight ends in this class that I have ranked higher than Greg Dulcich. Like, Greg Dulcich is okay.
Wow.
But last year, you could have easily got Isaiah Likely, Chigi Okonkwo, you know, Jelani Woods. Like, there are so many other tight ends from last year that would have been as good or better than Greg. I think Greg Dulcich gets a pass. It's probably the hair, Rachel. You know, where people are like, man, what a great bunch of hair. Well, when I was in the locker room, when they cleaned out lockers on the final day, I feel like it was the last day of school, and I was like, who's this reporter? It wasn't a reporter. It was Greg Dulcich. His body type, like he has the body type of a normal person. Like, dude, you gotta be rocked up. You gotta be Thor. You know,
sure.
like I don't want to see some guy that looks like a drummer for Collective Soul. Like it's an old reference, Rachel. But anyway, I'm like, So I think wide receiver wise, because the class is okay, teams might miss out on somebody. Say, hey, send a 4th rounder to Denver for Cortland Sutton or whatever. Maybe somebody breaks with the Jerry Jeudy thing. I'm not sure. But just based off of their interest in Alan Lazard, their interest in Adam Thielen, they're talking to wide receivers at the combine. Like, they are getting wide receivers. And as much as fans love them, and we all love everyone's the best ever forever and ever, or whatever I have to say so I don't get in trouble, they don't love them. They don't love them. And in football, one thing about these players, like the ultimate alphas, right? They just want you to love them. Cortland Sutton even said that. Like, I just want to go where I'm loved. Well, they don't love you here, man. Sorry.
What changed? Is it all just the injury? Because people were riding high.
Sean Payton, it's fresh eyes. You know, it's fresh eyes. Sean Payton will come in because what you have, like, for example, comic books. I'm surrounded by comic books, right? I could show you, Rachel, and invite you over to the house and be like, here's my first appearance of Wolverine, Hulk 181, and it's worth $3,000. And you'd be like, meh. Like, you wouldn't like that, you know, because that's you. That's not your thing. I could go over to your place and you could be like, here's my favorite thing of all time. And I'd be like, cool, next, you know, like, it's just, that's the way it is. So Sean Payton shows up and, you know, again, Broncos country, I love Cortland Sutton. I call Cortland Sutton the steal of the draft every time I see him. I haven't called him that in a while. Not because I haven't seen him, but because he's not going to be what he was.
Yeah.
And he's not going to regain that. And I think we have enough evidence now. I think Javonte Williams is the next Cortland Sutton, where it's like, you could have been great, could have been a contender, and it's just not going to happen. So when Sean Payton shows up in town and he looks over the roster, again, we love these guys. We love Tim Patrick, and we love Jerry Jeudy, and we love Cortland Sutton. We do. Sean Payton runs the show, man. So he shows up and is like, nah. Like, you all can love Cortland Sutton. That doesn't mean Sean Payton does.
Are you taking and trading Jeudy for a 1st round?
Oh, no one's going to give you that. I mean, if you can, you don't have a 1st rounder, you don't have a 2nd rounder. So yes, you are. I'm not in the department. And I feel like D sends out all these landmines because I heard D-Mac the other day. I transitioned on Denver Sports Tonight, and he's like, here's Cecil to tell you how much of an idiot I am. I'm like, no, it ain't about D's opinions. It ain't about that at all. So he sets out all these landmines, and then I step on them, and I'm like, oh, sorry, I didn't know that was your opinion. I don't subscribe to the trade Jerry Jeudy thing. I subscribe to the give him a 5th-year option. He will make you pay him. So that's what I like. And again, this is something where people go, oh, he's got to be the number 1 to stay dialed in. Yeah. It's like in The Waterboy when the mama, you know, and Adam Sandler's like, Mama can't respond because she's unconscious. And that one guy is like, wake her ass up.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Jerry Jeudy can't do anything unless he's the number 1 receiver. Well, make him the number 1 receiver. Like, he's the best receiver the Broncos have. And Timmy Pats, God bless the dog and him. Like, we love Tim Patrick. But he's also hurt a lot. That's why he was undrafted. I mean, when the NFL draft is not a crapshoot. This is where D-Mac and I come together. We share a moment, Rachel. And it's stupid. And I've told Mike Evans this. It triggers me. It does trigger me. When Mike Evans says the draft is a crapshoot, it's one of the dumbest things you could possibly say or think. I think Mike says it just to get under my skin now. I love you, Mike. I love you, D. But D and I always say, like, listen, you don't draft Tim Patrick because coming out of college, he's hurt all the damn time.
Yeah.
It's not that he can't play. Obviously, he can play. But why? Why did Shaq Barrett go undrafted from your Colorado State? Because he was seen as a bad body prospect. Like, you got to take the pre-draft process seriously. You can't come out all tubby. You know, and I'm not saying he was, but that's what scouts thought. And Shaq Barrett obviously can play. He's one of the best pass rushers in the league.
Uh-huh.
So it's like, get here. If you can get here, then stay here. And once you're here, you better hope you stay healthy. So Timmy Pats hasn't stayed healthy again. You shouldn't be shocked by that.
It breaks my heart though, and same for Javonte Williams. Everyone's talking about him, but now with Samaje Perine coming in, can he be running back number 1?
He should be. He should be easily. That's not. I mean, there's no doubt that Samaje Perine. I mean, take Joe Mixon out of Cincinnati. There was a lot of times Samaje Perine looked better.
True. Okay, so say Javonte never gets hurt. Who's the better running back?
Oh, it's Javonte. Easy.
Okay.
Because
it's Andrew.
Javonte's Nick Chubb. Like, if I just use comparison-wise, like, who's who, Samaje Perine's more C.J. Anderson, and I say that with a lot of endearment to my former bowling partner. Like, that's who he is,
Okay.
and he's done a really good job rounding out his game to be a better receiver. He's a screen guy. He's not a route runner. You're not getting Christian McCaffrey or whatever. Like, he's not going to line up in the slot, but Samaje Perine can be a reliable receiver. And his bowling ball is a runner, exactly what you need. But Javonte's Nick Chubb. Javonte's,
No.
and I don't want to say this because it sounds bad, but Javonte could have been on a Hall of Fame track.
Ugh.
I mean, that's how good that guy's talent is.
Yeah.
That's why he was my number 1 back over Najee Harris
Mhm.
when he came out of North Carolina. I was like, that's the best back in the league. The Broncos should get him. They got him. I'm over the moon. Now I'm just like, now you have a power back with a knee injury, a major knee injury. He's not
Yeah.
going to be ready week 1. This is a mistake George Payton made at the Combine, suggesting week 1.
Yeah.
There's so many ways to answer that. And George Payton, I think he was just excited he got to talk again because he doesn't talk a whole lot anymore. But I'm fine with that. Go get to work, man. Get a film study. That's what this time of year is all about.
Oh man, the Javonte stuff, it really, really hurts. But I also know you've done your pro days. You're all about the pro days. I know you went out to Boulder. Just tell me, I want a little bit of insight. Obviously, this isn't Prime's class that's going into the draft or anything of that nature, but was he there? Was the energy high? What was the feeling out there at pro day for CU?
I'm going to put together my thoughts on just everything CU and probably wear a cowboy hat, but I think everything's different in Boulder. You know, they don't have anybody going to the NFL. I'm sorry, you know. And again, I don't ever get into this to like bag on people. Like Montrell Washington's the nicest guy ever. He can't play.
Yeah.
Like, sorry, you know, and he's way better than me or whatever, but it's like, okay, CU doesn't have anybody. CSU doesn't have anybody. Wyoming, it's a borderline. Wyoming's been the best program here locally
Yeah.
for prospects. You know, so like that's always a stop I enjoy. What do I got? Provo coming up. What day is today? Okay, yeah. So yeah, all the time. But you know, I think everything's different in Boulder, and it will be different in the future. And that's where the excitement comes in with Deion Sanders. Is like Deion Sanders will bring the NFL spotlight back to Boulder. And one way I can always tell the health of a program, when I talk about Wyoming, Wyoming's heavily attended by NFL scouts.
Yeah.
CU isn't and hasn't been for a long time, and CSU never really is, other than Trey McBride.
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's just the God's honest truth. But I can tell you the health of a program by how interested NFL people are. There are a lot of people that I talk to that are interested in what's going to happen in Boulder. Not now, but what will happen under Deion Sanders' watch. So next year, it's going to be a party, y'all. It's going to be a party in Boulder.
Okay, sounds good. And I also know you're a big March Madness fan. I remember last year at this time we had done something around the bracket. And football's obviously number 1 for you, but you do like March Madness. So real quick, I want to get the heavy favorites are still the number 2 or the 2 number 1 seeds in Houston and Alabama. If you're jumping on one of those, who are you jumping on?
Houston, just because of Phi Slamma Jamma. Now, that's even before my time, Rachel. That's how long ago that is. But, like, yeah, give me some Phi Slamma Jamma out there with Houston. So, yeah, let's do that. And it's the greatest sporting event we have.
Oh,
and I'm
it
sorry I'm being long-winded today. And I'm sorry I'm yelling. I'm, like, not even angry.
You
I'm
had
just,
your
like,
caffeine.
I'm just fired up about this Broncos team. But March Madness is the greatest sporting event we get, period. It's way better than the Super Bowl, way better than the World Series, way better than the World Cup or whatever. I'm making Jake mad. But, like, yeah, it's way better than anything else we get.
Agreed.
Anything. It's March Madness. It's still pure.
Did you do a bracket?
I think so. I was supposed to, but I
If
don't
you
know.
actually filled it out, that's the question. I guess
I'm underwater with film, so like when I get texts from people are like, "Hey, did you see the game in Purdue?" and I'm like, I was watching football, so like, yeah. I mean, I'll tell you about A.T. Perry if you want to hear that, but like, I'm kind of boring at parties, Rachel. I apologize.
I did just learn that you are last place with our very own Derek Wolf
Ah,
in our bracket challenge here for
okay.
104 through the fan and Denver Sports. So I hate to burst your bubble, but I'm glad you're not too upset about it either.
I'll be all right.
All right, all right. Well, Cecil, I appreciate you, coming on coffee break, hanging out with us instead of watching film this morning. And I'm glad the caffeine kicked in. I hope it kicks in tonight too for Orange and Blue today. Are you doing any Denver sports tonight this week?
Friday.
Nice. All right. Are you soloing it?
Hmm. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Cecil solo.
Yeah, I just got too much to say and I got a lot of yelling to do, so I just always ask permission because I love everybody. Well,
Mhm.
everybody that works for us. I don't love everybody in the Denver media. That's another story. But like, I
That's
love all of us for Denver sports. And I'm
perfect.
like, I love doing shows, but it's only an hour. I'm like, baby, I got so much to say. Like, I told James, I called up James. I was like, James, baby, like, you got to let me go solo. So he lets me go solo.
There you go, Friday night, and then Orange and Blue today, of course, with Cecil and Mase at 3:30 today. Definitely tune in and check it out. But for everybody, thank you so much for hanging with us. Thanks for all your questions too in the comments and everything. We love seeing it. We do have one last one for you, Cecil. What
Mm.
does Cecil's hat mean?
Oh, it's the name of my independent comic book company, and it was the name of my truck in high school. I drove it for a semester in college without a water pump, so it would smoke everywhere.
Oh my
So everyone would be like, "Your car's on fire," and I'd be like, "I know." But so my best friend Big E nicknamed my truck the Smoking Gun, and so when we started our comic book company, I was like, "We're gonna call it Smoking Gun Comics." So
Oh my gosh. Okay. I love that it has some meaning before it. Troy, great question in the comments. Everybody, again, thank you so much for hanging out with us. Cecil, Mace, big appreciation to you guys. And we'll see you guys tomorrow morning, 10:30 a.m. for another episode of Coffee Break. Have a wonderful Tuesday, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow.